The golden sun painted the dusty streets of Nebraska City, Nebraska, in a warm amber glow as Delia Finch counted the last of her coins, knowing full well they wouldn't be enough to see her through the week, let alone the month. The year was 1879, and like many in this frontier town, survival meant making difficult choices every single day. Delia had arrived in Nebraska City just 3 weeks prior, fleeing a life in St. Louis that had promised much but delivered heartbreak and betrayal. At 24, she possessed skills as a seamstress, but finding steady work in a town where most folks mended their own clothes had proven challenging. What little money she'd brought with her had dwindled rapidly, spent on a small room above the general store and the bare necessities to keep her stomach from growling too loudly. Today, her situation felt particularly dire. She had exactly $1 to her name, a single silver coin that represented her entire fortune. Delia clutched it tightly in her palm as she walked down the main street, mentally calculating what meager supplies she might purchase to sustain herself. That's when she saw him, an elderly man sitting in the shade of the livery stable, his clothes tattered and his weathered face speaking of years spent under the harsh prairie sun. A small tin cup sat before him, empty save for a few pennies. His eyes, clouded with cataracts, stared vacantly ahead, but his expression held a dignity that transcended his circumstances. Delia paused. She recognized the look of hunger in the old man's sunken cheeks, had seen it in her own reflection that very morning. For a long moment, she stood frozen in indecision, her fingers tightening around her last dollar. What she didn't notice was the tall figure leaning against the post office porch, observing her internal struggle with keen interest. Rylan Nash had ridden into town that morning after delivering a herd of cattle to the railway station. At 32, he'd spent more than half his life working cattle drives across the untamed West, his skin bronzed by the sun, his hands calloused from years of hard work. Rylan watched as the woman in the faded blue dress finally made her decision. With a gentle smile, she approached the blind beggar and pressed her dollar, clearly her only dollar, into his palm, closing his fingers around it. "God bless you, miss," the old man said, his voice cracking with emotion. "And you as well, sir," she replied softly, then straightened her shoulders and continued on her way, her stride purposeful despite the sacrifice she'd just made. Something about her gesture stirred something in Rylan's chest. In a world where most folks looked out only for themselves, such selflessness was as rare as gold nuggets in a played-out mine. He'd seen plenty of charity given from abundance, but charity given from scarcity that was something altogether different. As twilight descended over Nebraska City, Delia sat on the edge of her narrow bed, trying to ignore the persistent growling of her empty stomach. She'd spent the afternoon inquiring at shops about potential work, receiving only apologetic shakes of the head. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would try the hotel. Perhaps they needed someone to launder linens or mend tablecloths. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Cautiously, she approached it. "Who is it?" she called. "Madam, I've got a message for you from the Silver Spur restaurant," a young boy's voice replied. Puzzled, Delia opened the door to find a freckle-faced youth of about 12. "Mr. Holloway says you're invited to dinner tonight, all expenses paid. He said to come right away while the food's hot." "There must be some mistake," Delia said, shaking her head. "I don't know any Mr. Holloway." The boy shrugged. "Don't know nothing about that, madam. I just know I'm supposed to escort you to the Silver Spur and that your dinner's waiting." Delia hesitated. The Silver Spur was the finest eating establishment in Nebraska City, a place she'd passed by with longing glances but never expected to enter. Hunger wrestled with suspicion in her mind. "Who arranged this?" she asked. "Don't rightly know, madam. I was just told to fetch you." Against her better judgment, but driven by hunger and curiosity, Delia quickly tidied her hair, adjusted her dress, and followed the boy down the stairs and along the darkening street to the Silver Spur restaurant. The establishment glowed with lamplight, the tantalizing smells of roasted beef and fresh bread wafting through the air. Delia's mouth watered involuntarily as she stepped inside, feeling immediately out of place among the well-dressed patrons. "Miss Finch." A portly man in a white apron approached her. "I'm Mr. Holloway, the proprietor. Your table is ready. Please follow me." Delia followed, her confusion mounting. "Sir, I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "I didn't arrange. No misunderstanding, miss," Holloway said, leading her to a table in the corner where a solitary figure rose to greet them. "Your host is waiting." Delia found herself looking up into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath a shock of dark brown hair. "Miss Finch," the stranger said, removing his hat to reveal more of those chestnut locks. "I'm Rylan Nash. I hope you'll do me the honor of joining me for dinner." Delia stood speechless, her mind racing to place this man who apparently knew her name. "I'm afraid we haven't been introduced, Mr. Nash," she finally managed. A smile creased his face, creating lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he spent much of his time outdoors. "No formal introduction, that's true, but I saw you earlier today near the livery stable." He pulled out a chair for her. "Please sit. The stew here is particularly good." Realization dawned on Delia as she hesitantly took the offered seat. "You saw me with the blind beggar." Rylan settled across from her, his movements possessing the fluid grace of a man comfortable in his own skin. "I did. It's not every day you see someone give their last dollar to a stranger." Heat rushed to Delia's cheeks. "How did you know it was my last? The way you held it. The time you took deciding." His eyes held hers. "And the fact that you're wearing your only good dress, which has been carefully mended at least twice." Delia's embarrassment turned swiftly to indignation. "I didn't realize my personal circumstances were so transparent to passing cowboys, or that they warranted such scrutiny." To her surprise, Rylan laughed a warm, genuine sound. "My apologies, Miss Finch. 7 years driving cattle makes a man observant, not necessarily tactful." His expression grew more serious. "What I witnessed was an act of kindness that would have done credit to a woman with thousands in the bank, let alone someone down to her last dollar." Before Delia could respond, a waiter appeared with plates of steaming food, tender beef stew swimming with vegetables, a basket of fresh bread, and a slab of butter that made Delia's mouth water just looking at it. "Please," Rylan gestured to the feast, "eat while it's hot." Hunger overrode Delia's pride. She broke off a piece of bread, spread it with butter, and took a bite that nearly made her knees weak with pleasure. The stew proved equally delicious, rich with flavors she hadn't experienced in weeks. They ate in silence for several minutes before Rylan spoke again. "You're new to Nebraska City." It wasn't a question, but Delia nodded anyway. 3 weeks. I came from St. Louis. That's quite a journey for a woman alone." She met his gaze steadily. "Sometimes being alone is preferable to the alternative." Something in her tone must have conveyed the weight behind her words because Rylan simply nodded. "Fair enough. What brings you to our little corner of Nebraska?" "A fresh start," Delia said, suddenly finding herself wanting to explain. "I had a position as a seamstress for a prominent family in St. Louis. When the son of the house began making unwanted advances, I reported his behavior to his mother." She laughed bitterly. "She thanked me for my honesty, then dismissed me the next day for fabricating lies about her precious son." Rylan's expression darkened. Some folks mistake wealth for character. A common error, Delia agreed. I had references from previous employers, but the family spread rumors that destroyed my reputation. I couldn't find work anywhere respectable. She took another bite of stew to hide the tremor in her voice. Nebraska City seemed far enough away to start fresh. And have you found work here? Delia sighed. Not yet. I've been doing odd mending jobs, but nothing steady. I'm calling on the hotel tomorrow. She straightened her shoulders. I'll find something, I always do. Rylan studied her for a moment, then nodded as if confirming something to himself. I believe you will. You strike me as a woman of considerable resourcefulness, Miss Finch. Please call me Delia, she found herself saying, surprising herself with the invitation. Delia, he repeated, and somehow her name sounded different in his deep voice. Then I insist you call me Rylan. As they continued their meal, Delia learned that Rylan worked for the Diamond Bar Ranch, located about 20 miles outside of town. He just completed a cattle drive to the railhead and would be staying in Nebraska City for a few days before heading back to the ranch. What about family? Delia asked. Do you have folks waiting for you somewhere? A shadow passed over Rylan's features. Lost my parents to cholera when I was 16. No siblings. Been making my own way since then. I'm sorry, Delia said softly. My mother died when I was 12. My father followed 5 years later, a logging accident. So we're both alone in the world, Rylan observed. Delia smiled faintly. It would seem so. By the time they finished their meal, including a shared slice of apple pie that tasted like heaven itself, Delia found herself genuinely enjoying Rylan's company. Despite his rugged exterior, he possessed a quiet intelligence and thoughtfulness that surprised her. Thank you for dinner, she said as they stepped out into the cool night air. It was unexpected but very welcome. It was my pleasure, Rylan replied, settling his hat back on his head. May I walk you back to your lodgings? The streets of Nebraska City were dark now, with only a few establishments still showing light through their windows. Delia nodded gratefully. As they walked, their conversation continued to flow easily. Rylan told her about life on the cattle drives, the endless horizons, the camaraderie among the cowboys, the satisfaction of delivering a herd safely to market. Delia found herself painting mental pictures as he spoke, imagining the vast landscapes he described. All too soon they arrived at the staircase leading to her room above the general store. Thank you again, Delia said, suddenly shy, for dinner and the escort. Rylan removed his hat, holding it against his chest. Miss Finch, Delia, I've been thinking. The ranch owner's wife, Mrs. Caldwell, has been looking for someone skilled with a needle. Her eyesight isn't what it used to be, and she has a heap of mending that needs doing. If you're interested, I could mention your name to her. Hope fluttered in Delia's chest, but experience had taught her caution. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition. Martha Caldwell is fair and pays well for quality work. He hesitated. I'll be in town for 2 more days before heading back. If you're interested, meet me at the Silver Spur tomorrow at noon. If not, I understand completely. Delia studied his face in the dim light spilling from the general store's windows, searching for any sign of deception. She found none, only an earnest offer of help. I'll consider it, she promised. Good night, Rylan. Good night, Delia, he replied, a smile warming his voice. Sleep well. Delia watched him walk away, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness. Only when he disappeared did she climb the stairs to her small room, her mind whirling with the evening's unexpected turn of events. As she prepared for bed, her stomach full for the first time in days, Delia tried to make sense of Rylan Nash. Men, in her experience, rarely offered help without expecting something in return. Yet his dinner invitation and job suggestion seemed genuinely born of kindness rather than ulterior motives. Could she trust him? The prospect of steady work at her ranch was tempting. Even if it was only temporary, it would give her breathing room to establish herself in Nebraska City. Delia fell asleep weighing her options, the memory of Rylan's blue eyes following her into her dreams. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through Delia's window. She rose early, washed with the cold water from her basin, and dressed in her second-best dress, a simple brown cotton garment that she'd managed to keep in reasonable condition. Today, she decided, she would indeed meet Rylan at noon, but first she would follow through on her plan to inquire at the hotel. The Nebraska City Hotel stood proudly on the corner of Main and Central, a 3-story building that represented the town's growing prosperity. Inside, Delia approached the front desk with practiced confidence. "Good morning," she greeted the clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose. "I'm inquiring about any positions you might have available, particularly for someone with sewing skills." The clerk regarded her with mild interest. "You'd want to speak with Mrs. Pemberton, our housekeeper. She handles all the hiring for those matters." "Is she available?" "She is, but I should warn you, we've just filled a position yesterday for laundry and mending." A woman from Council Bluffs took the job. Delia's heart sank, but she maintained her composure. "I'd still like to speak with Mrs. Pemberton, if I may. Perhaps she knows of other opportunities in town." The clerk nodded and disappeared through a door behind the desk. Moments later, a stout woman in a crisp black dress emerged, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Mrs. Pemberton proved polite but confirmed what the clerk had said. "I'm afraid we've just filled our only vacancy, miss. And I don't know of any other establishments currently hiring for such work." She looked Delia over with a professional eye. "You seem a respectable sort. Have you tried the dressmaker's shop? Mrs. Winters sometimes takes on help during busy seasons." "I have," Delia admitted. "She has no need for additional hands at present." The housekeeper nodded sympathetically. "Well, leave your name. If our new girl doesn't work out or if circumstances change, we'll send word." Delia thanked her and stepped back onto the street, her earlier optimism diminished but not extinguished. She still had her meeting with Rylan to look forward to, and the possibility of work at the Diamond Bar Ranch. As noon approached, Delia made her way to the Silver Spur, her steps quickening despite her attempts to maintain a dignified pace. She told herself it was eagerness about the job prospect, not anticipation of seeing Rylan again, that hastened her feet. He was already there when she arrived, seated at a table near the window. When he caught sight of her, he stood immediately, a smile spreading across his features. "You came," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "I did," Delia confirmed, settling onto the seat. "Your offer of work is too generous to dismiss without consideration." "It's not charity," Rylan clarified quickly. "Martha Caldwell truly needs someone with your skills. She's been complaining for months about her failing eyesight and the pile of mending that grows taller by the week." The waiter approached, and to Delia's surprise, Rylan had already ordered for them both a simple lunch of sandwiches and coffee. "I hope you don't mind," he said, noting her expression. "I took the liberty since our time might be limited." "Not at all," Delia assured him, though privately she noted that most men would never consider a woman might have preferences of her own. Still, the food looked appetizing, and her morning's disappointment had left her with an appetite. As they ate, Rylan explained more about the Diamond Bar Ranch. Owned by Edward and Martha Caldwell, it sprawled across several thousand acres of prime grazing land. Rylan served as their foreman, overseeing a crew of cowboys who tended the herd and maintained the property. "The main house is comfortable," he told her. "The Caldwells are fair employers who treat their workers with respect. Martha would likely set you up in one of the spare rooms in the house itself." "It sounds promising," Delia admitted. "But I'm curious, why would Mrs. Caldwell trust a stranger on your recommendation alone?" Rylan's expression turned serious. "The Caldwells took me in when I was just a scrawny 17-year-old with nothing but the clothes on my back and a borrowed horse. They gave me a chance when no one else would. I've been with them for 15 years now, worked my way up from stable boy to foreman." His blue eyes held her steadily. "They trust my judgment, and I don't give my word lightly." Something in his earnest delivery convinced Delia he was telling the truth. "When would I need to leave for the ranch?" "I head back tomorrow morning. If you decide to accept the position, you could travel with me." He must have seen the flash of uncertainty in her eyes, because he quickly added, "The ranch cook, Hector, will be with us. He's in town picking up supplies. It's a half-day's journey in the wagon." Delia considered her options. Remaining in Nebraska City meant continued uncertainty, with her meager savings already depleted. The position at the Diamond Bar offered immediate employment and lodging. "I would need references for Mrs. Caldwell," she said. "I have letters from previous employers in St. Louis before the incident I mentioned." Rylan nodded. "Bring them with you. Martha will want to see them, though I suspect my recommendation will carry significant weight." He hesitated. "There is one thing you should know. The Diamond Bar is somewhat isolated. The nearest town is a good 2 hours' ride. Some folks find the solitude challenging." "After the past few months, a little peace sounds appealing," Delia replied honestly. They finished their meal discussing practical matters, what belongings Delia should bring, what she could expect in terms of duties and compensation. By the time they parted ways, she had agreed to meet Rylan at the general store at 8 the following morning, with her decision made. "Until tomorrow, then," Rylan said, tipping his hat to her. "Tomorrow," Delia echoed, watching him stride down the street. That evening, Delia carefully packed her few possessions into the small trunk she'd brought from St. Louis. Her decision to accompany Rylan to the Diamond Bar Ranch wasn't made lightly, but the prospect of steady work and a roof over her head outweighed the uncertainties of remaining in town without employment. She slept fitfully, her mind alternating between hope for this new opportunity and anxiety about leaving the relative safety of Nebraska City for an unknown situation. By dawn, however, her resolve had solidified. She was going to the Diamond Bar. Rylan arrived precisely at 8, driving a wagon laden with supplies. Beside him sat a portly Mexican man with a magnificent mustache, who introduced himself as Hector Ramirez, the ranch cook. "So you are the seamstress Mr. Nash has been telling us about," Hector said, his accent thick but his English clear. "Mrs. Caldwell will be pleased. She has been squinting at her needlework like a near-blind owl for months now." Delia laughed at the colorful description. "I hope I can be of help to her." With her trunk secured in the wagon bed, they set off, the town of Nebraska City soon giving way to rolling prairie. The journey proved more comfortable than Delia had anticipated. The spring weather was mild. The wagon had good springs, and the conversation flowed easily among the three travelers. Hector regaled her with stories of life on the Diamond Bar, painting vivid pictures of cattle roundups, holiday celebrations, and the various characters who made up the ranch's workforce. Rylan occasionally interjected with his own observations or gentle corrections when Hector's storytelling became too embellished. By midday, Delia could see the landscape changing. the flat prairie giving way to more varied terrain with gentle hills and scattered groves of cottonwood trees. They stopped briefly by a creek to rest the horses and eat a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and apples that Hector had packed. Not much farther now, Rylan told her as they resumed their journey. Another hour or so and you'll see the Diamond Bar. True to his word, just as the afternoon sun began its westward descent, they crested a rise that revealed a verdant valley below. Nestled within it stood a sprawling ranch house with several outbuildings, corrals, and barns arranged in a practical layout. Cattle grazed on the surrounding pasture land, and in the distance, Delia could make out riders moving among the herd. "Welcome to the Diamond Bar," Rylan said, a note of pride in his voice. As they approached, details became clearer. The main house was an impressive two-story structure built of sturdy logs and clapboard, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, and several dogs bounded out to greet the arriving wagon. A woman emerged onto the porch as they pulled up to the house. In her 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair and a face lined by years in the sun, she carried herself with the straight-backed dignity of someone accustomed to managing a large household. "Martha," Rylan called in greeting as he brought the wagon to a halt. "We've returned with supplies and a solution to your mending woes." Martha Caldwell shaded her eyes against the sun, peering at Delia. "So this is the young woman you wrote about in your message." Her voice was warm but assessing. "Come inside, dear. You must be tired after the journey." Rylan helped Delia down from the wagon, his strong hands at her waist sending an unexpected flutter through her stomach. "Go on," he encouraged. "I'll bring your trunk in once we've unloaded the supplies." Inside, the ranch house proved as impressive as its exterior promised. The main room featured a massive stone fireplace, comfortable furnishings, and touches of refinement that spoke of Martha Caldwell's Eastern upbringing. Fine china, displayed in a cabinet, landscape paintings on the walls, and shelves lined with books. "Sit down, Miss Finch," Martha invited, gesturing to a chair. "Hector will bring us some tea and we can discuss your position here." The interview that followed was thorough but cordial. Martha examined Delia's reference letters, asked pointed questions about her experience and abilities, and finally presented her with a man's shirt in need of mending. "Show me what you can do," she requested, providing needle, thread, and thimble. Delia worked confidently, her stitches even and nearly invisible as she repaired a torn seam. Martha watched with approval. "Rylan was right about your skill," she pronounced when Delia had finished. "I'm prepared to offer you room and board plus $10 a month to start. Your duties would primarily involve mending and occasional new garments for the ranch hands, helping with household sewing, and assisting with other light household tasks as needed. Would that be acceptable?" The terms were more than fair, generous even. Delia accepted immediately. "Excellent," Martha said with satisfaction. "Let me show you to your room. You can get settled in before supper." The room assigned to Delia was small but pleasant, located on the second floor with a window overlooking the eastern pastures. A narrow bed, a washstand, a chest of drawers, and a small writing desk comprised the furnishings. After weeks in her cramped quarters above the general store, it felt luxurious. "Supper is at 6 sharp," Martha informed her. "Edward, my husband, is checking on a sick calf with our son Thomas, but they'll be back by then. You can meet the rest of the household then." Left alone, Delia unpacked her few belongings, arranging them carefully in the drawers. The reality of her situation was just beginning to sink in. In the space of 2 days, she had gone from desperate straits in Nebraska City to secure employment and lodging at one of the territory's prominent ranches, all because a cowboy had noticed her giving her last dollar to a beggar. The thought of Rylan brought a smile to her face. There was something about him, a steadiness, an integrity that had compelled her to trust him despite her usual caution around men. She wondered how their interactions would change now that she was an employee of the ranch rather than a woman he'd helped in town. At 6 o'clock, Delia made her way downstairs, following the sounds of conversation and the enticing aromas emanating from the kitchen. The dining room contained a long table already set for the evening meal. Martha introduced her to Edward Caldwell, a robust man in his late 60s with a shock of white hair and weathered features that creased into a welcoming smile. Their son, Thomas Caldwell, proved to be a serious young man about Rylan's age, with his mother's dark hair and his father's sturdy build. He greeted Delia politely but with reserve. Rylan entered just as they were taking their seats, freshly washed and changed from his travel clothes. His eyes found Delia immediately, a smile warming his features when he saw her seated at the table. "I see you're getting settled," he remarked, taking the chair opposite her. "Yes, everyone has been very welcoming," Delia replied, conscious of Martha's observant gaze flicking between them. The meal proceeded pleasantly, with conversation flowing around the table. Delia learned that Edward had established the Diamond Bar 30 years earlier, when Nebraska was still a territory rather than a state. Thomas had been born and raised on the ranch, and now managed the breeding program that had made their cattle some of the most sought after in the region. "And Rylan here is practically family," Edward said at one point, clapping the younger man on the shoulder. "Best foreman in 3 counties. Don't know what we'd do without him." Delia noticed how Rylan accepted the praise with quiet dignity, neither false modesty nor pride coloring his response. It confirmed her initial impression of him as a man comfortable in his own skin, secure in his worth. After the meal, while Martha and Delia cleared the dishes, the ranch mistress spoke in a low voice. "I noticed how Rylan looks at you. There's a story there, I suspect." Delia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He saw me in a moment of charity, I suppose, and responded with kindness of his own." Martha's eyes sparkled with interest. "Rylan isn't one to make grand gestures, especially for strangers. Whatever you did must have impressed him deeply." "I simply gave $1 to a blind beggar," Delia explained. "It wasn't anything extraordinary." "Except it was your last dollar." Rylan's voice came from behind them. He'd entered the kitchen carrying a stack of plates. "Don't diminish your generosity, Delia." Martha's eyebrows rose at his use of Delia's first name, but she made no comment, simply taking the plates from him with a knowing smile. The days that followed established a new rhythm for Delia. Each morning after breakfast, she would set up her sewing in the small parlor off the main room, where the light was best. Martha brought her accumulated mending shirts with torn sleeves, trousers with split seams, socks with holes worn through at heel and toe. Delia worked efficiently, her needle flashing as she transformed the damaged garments into serviceable items once more. In the afternoons, she often helped Martha with other household tasks, churning butter, preserving fruits from the small orchard behind the house, or assisting Hector with meal preparations. The work was steady but not overwhelming, and for the first time in months, Delia felt the security of knowing where her next meal would come from. Rylan's duties kept him busy around the ranch, but he was a constant presence at mealtimes. Delia found her eyes drawn to him whenever he entered a room, appreciating the quiet confidence with which he carried himself. Occasionally, their gazes would meet across the table, and the warmth in his blue eyes would send a flutter through her chest that she tried to ignore. She'd learned her lesson in St. Louis about the dangers of workplace attachments. Whatever attraction she might feel toward Rylan Nash needed to remain firmly controlled. Her position at the Diamond Bar was too valuable to risk. 2 weeks after her arrival, Delia was sitting on the front porch in the late afternoon, mending one of Edward's shirts when Rylan approached on horseback. He dismounted smoothly, his movements displaying the easy grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. "Afternoon, Delia," he greeted, removing his hat as he climbed the porch steps. "How are you finding life on the Diamond Bar?" "I'm enjoying it very much," she replied honestly. "Mrs. Caldwell is a fair employer and the work suits me well." Rylan settled into the chair beside her, stretching his long legs out before him. "Martha says your sewing has been a godsend. The men are pleased too, they're not used to having their clothes mended so neatly." Delia smiled, pleased by the compliment. "It's satisfying work." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the only sounds being the distant lowing of cattle and the rhythmic movement of Delia's needle through fabric. "There's a social in town this Saturday," Rylan said suddenly. "A dance at the meeting hall. Several of us from the ranch will be attending." He turned to look at her directly. "I was wondering if you might like to accompany me." Delia's hand stilled. "As your escort?" "As my dance partner," Rylan clarified, "if you'd like to go." The invitation sent a thrill through Delia that she tried to suppress. "I'm not sure it would be appropriate. I'm an employee here, and so am I," Rylan pointed out. "And it's just a dance, Delia. The Caldwells would be pleased to see you enjoying yourself. Martha mentioned this morning that you haven't left the ranch since you arrived." It was true. Delia had been so grateful for the security of her position that she'd immersed herself completely in ranch life, not venturing beyond its boundaries. "I don't have anything suitable to wear to a dance," she admitted, thinking of her two well-worn dresses. Rylan's eyes twinkled. "Somehow I suspect a talented seamstress might be able to create something with 2 weeks' notice." Delia laughed despite herself. "You make a compelling argument, Mr. Nash. Does that mean you'll come?" She hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I believe I will." The smile that spread across Rylan's face made her heart skip a beat. "Good, that's good." He stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I'd better get back to work before Edward thinks I've abandoned my duties to sit and talk with pretty seamstresses." The casual compliment brought a flush to Delia's cheeks that lingered long after Rylan had disappeared toward the stables. That evening, she approached Martha about the dance. "Rylan mentioned there's a social in town this Saturday," she began. Martha looked up from her knitting with a knowing smile. "Yes, a spring dance. Are you thinking of attending, if it wouldn't be inconvenient?" Delia said. "Rylan has offered to escort me." "Has he indeed?" Martha's eyes twinkled. "I'm glad to hear it. Rylan spends too much time working and not enough enjoying himself." She set her knitting aside. "Do you have a dress for the occasion?" Delia shook her head. "No, but I was hoping I might use some of the fabric in the sewing room to make something simple." "Nonsense," Martha declared. "I have just the thing." She led Delia upstairs to the master bedroom and opened a large trunk at the foot of the bed. From it, she withdrew a dress of deep blue silk, simply cut but elegant in its lines. "This was my daughter Rebecca's," Martha explained. "She lives in Denver now with her husband and children. The dress has been sitting here gathering dust since her last visit." She held it up against Delia. "With a few alterations, I believe it would fit you beautifully." "Oh, I couldn't possibly," Delia began, but Martha waved away her objection. "Consider it a loan if that makes you more comfortable. Rebecca would be pleased to know her dress was being put to good use." Overwhelmed by the generosity, Delia accepted the gift. Over the next 2 weeks, she spent her evenings altering the dress to fit her slimmer frame, taking in the bodice and adjusting the length. The work was a joy, the silk fabric a luxury she'd rarely had the opportunity to handle, even in her previous position in St. Louis. By the time Saturday arrived, Delia had transformed the dress into a garment that fit her perfectly, enhancing her figure without being a modist. The deep blue color brought out the auburn highlights in her brown hair and complemented her fair complexion. Martha helped her arrange her hair, twisting it into an elegant knot at the nape of her neck with a few soft curls framing her face. "There," the older woman said with satisfaction. "Rylan won't know what hit him," Delia blushed. "Mrs. Caldwell, I assure you it's just a dance." Martha patted her cheek affectionately. "My dear, I've watched that man for 15 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Before Delia could formulate a response, a knock came at the front door downstairs. Martha's eyes twinkled. "That will be your escort. Don't keep him waiting." When Delia descended the stairs, she had the satisfaction of seeing Rylan's eyes widen in appreciation. He stood in the entryway wearing a clean white shirt, dark trousers, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His hair was neatly combed, and for once, no hat obscured his handsome features. "Delia," he said, his voice suddenly husky, "you look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his admiring gaze. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Nash." Edward appeared from his study, nodding approval. "You two make a handsome couple. Don't stay out too late, mind. Sunday chores still need doing, regardless of how many dances you attend." "Yes, sir," Rylan agreed, offering his arm to Delia. "Shall we?" Outside, a buggy waited, polished to a shine. Rylan helped Delia up, his hands lingering at her waist slightly longer than necessary, before climbing up beside her and taking the reins. As they drove toward town, the setting sun painted the prairie in hues of gold and amber. The air was mild, carrying the scent of spring flowers and new grass. Delia found herself relaxing, enjoying the gentle sway of the buggy and Rylan's solid presence beside her. "I haven't been to a dance in years," she admitted as they neared the town. "No, I would have thought a woman as graceful as you would be a regular at such events." "My father didn't approve of dances after my mother died," Delia explained. "He thought them frivolous, and in St. Louis, the family I worked for wouldn't have dreamed of allowing their seamstress to attend the same social functions they did." Rylan's jaw tightened. "Well, here in Nebraska, we're less concerned with such distinctions. A person is judged by their character, not their occupation." "Is that what attracted you to the West?" Delia asked. "The freedom from social constraints," Rylan considered the question. "Partly. When I left Ohio at 16, I was running from more than social expectations. My father was a harsh man, quick with his fists and quicker with criticism. After my mother died, living under his roof became unbearable." He shrugged. "The West offered space to breathe, to become my own man without his shadow looming over me." "I'm sorry about your father," Delia said softly. "Don't be. His cruelty made me determined to be a different sort of man." Rylan glanced at her. "What about you? What brought you west?" Delia had already shared the bare outlines of her story. But now, in the intimacy of the buggy with twilight gathering around them, she found herself revealing more her father's descent into grief-stricken melancholy after her mother's death, the years of near poverty as she struggled to support them both with her sewing, the relief tinged with guilt when he finally passed. "I thought St. Louis would be my fresh start," she concluded. "I never imagined I'd end up in Nebraska." "Are you disappointed?" Rylan asked, his voice serious. Delia considered the question honestly. "No," she finally said. "Frightened sometimes, uncertain often, but not disappointed." The town appeared before them, the windows of the meeting hall blazing with light. Music drifted on the evening air, along with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Rylan helped Delia down from the buggy, again his touch lingering longer than strictly necessary. Inside, the meeting hall had been transformed. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. At one end, a small band of musicians played fiddle, banjo, and piano. The floor was already filled with couples circling in time to a lively tune. Delia recognized several faces from the Diamond Bar among the crowd. Thomas Caldwell was there with a pretty blonde woman, and Hector sat with the musicians, occasionally contributing with a harmonica. Townspeople mingled with ranchers and farmers from the surrounding countryside. The social boundaries that might have existed in eastern cities temporarily suspended in this frontier gathering. "May I have this dance?" Rylan asked formally, extending his hand. Delia placed her fingers in his. "You may." As he led her onto the floor, Delia felt a momentary panic. It had been so long since she danced, would she remember the steps? Her worry proved unfounded. Rylan was a confident partner, guiding her smoothly through the patterns of the dance. His hand at her waist was firm but gentle, and he moved with the same natural grace he displayed on horseback. One dance led to another, and Delia found herself laughing more than she had in years. Rylan introduced her to various neighbors and friends, but always returned to claim her for the next dance. When a waltz began, he drew her closer than before, his blue eyes never leaving her face as they swirled around the floor. "You're a natural dancer," he told her. "You're a natural flatterer," she countered, but couldn't suppress her pleased smile. During a break in the dancing, Rylan fetched them cups of punch, and they stepped outside to enjoy the cool evening air. The stars blazed overhead, more brilliant than Delia had ever seen them in the city. "It's beautiful here," she murmured, gazing upward. "Yes, it is," Rylan agreed, though when she glanced at him, she found him looking not at the stars but at her. A warmth that had nothing to do with dancing spread through Delia's chest. For a moment she hoped he might kiss her. Instead, he gently tucked a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek in a touch so light it might have been imagined. "We should probably return," he said, his voice lower than usual. "I promised Edward we wouldn't be too late." The drive back to the ranch passed in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the darkened house, Rylan slowed the horses. "Thank you for accompanying me tonight," he said. "I hope you enjoyed yourself." "I did," Delia assured him, "more than I can express." Rylan smiled, the moonlight silvering his features. "Good, that's good." He helped her down from the buggy, and together they walked to the house. At the door, Delia turned to bid him good night, only to find him standing closer than she'd realized, his expression intent. "Delia," he began, then hesitated. "Yes," she prompted, her heart suddenly racing. Rylan seemed to be waging some internal battle. Finally, he stepped back slightly. "Nothing, just sleep well." A mixture of disappointment and relief washed over Delia. "You too, Rylan. And thank you again for a lovely evening." Inside her room, as she carefully removed the blue silk dress, Delia tried to make sense of her conflicting emotions. Attraction to Rylan was undeniable, but pursuing such feelings could jeopardize her position at the ranch. And yet, the way he looked at her, spoke to her, suggested his interest might be more than passing. She fell asleep with the memory of his hand at her waist, guiding her through the dance. The weeks that followed brought a subtle shift in Delia and Rylan's interactions. Nothing was overtly different. They still maintained the proper distance of colleagues, but their conversations lingered longer. Their gazes held more meaning, and they seemed to gravitate toward each other whenever circumstances permitted. May gave way to June, and the ranch bustled with activity as calving season reached its peak. Delia found her workload increased as well, with Martha commissioning new curtains for the parlor and shirts for Edward and Thomas. One afternoon, while she worked on the curtains, Thomas entered the parlor, his expression serious. "Miss Finch, might I have a word?" Delia set aside her sewing. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell." Thomas took a seat across from her, his posture stiff. "I've noticed the attention Rylan has been paying you recently." Delia felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Nash has been nothing but respectful, I assure you." "I don't doubt it," Thomas said quickly. "Rylan is an honorable man. It's just—" He paused, searching for words. "He's important to the Diamond Bar, vital even. My father isn't getting any younger, and I rely heavily on Rylan's experience and judgment." Understanding dawned on Delia. "You're concerned that personal entanglements might affect his commitment to the ranch." Thomas nodded, looking relieved that she'd grasped his meaning. "Exactly. Rylan has turned down offers from other ranches over the years, better paying positions that would have given him the opportunity to eventually buy his own spread. He stayed loyal to us, and we depend on that loyalty." Delia considered her response carefully. "I understand your concern, Mr. Caldwell, but I think you underestimate Mr. Nash's dedication to the Diamond Bar. Whatever friendship might be developing between us, I've seen nothing to suggest it would undermine his responsibilities here." Thomas studied her for a long moment. "You care for him." It wasn't a question, but Delia answered anyway. "I respect and admire him greatly." A smile touched Thomas's usually serious face. "That's not what I asked, but it's answer enough." He stood. "Forgive me for interfering, Miss Finch. It wasn't my place." After he left, Delia sat motionless, her sewing forgotten in her lap. Thomas's concerns had verbalized her own unspoken fears about her growing feelings for Rylan. What future could there be for them? Even if Rylan returned her feelings, and there were moments when she was certain he did, his commitment to the ranch seemed unshakable. That evening, as Delia helped Martha prepare supper, the older woman noticed her distraction. "Something troubling you, dear?" Delia hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Thomas spoke to me today about Rylan." Martha's eyebrows rose. "Did he indeed? What did my son have to say?" "He expressed concern about Rylan's attention toward me, worried it might affect his commitment to the ranch." Martha set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables, her expression a mixture of exasperation and amusement. "Thomas takes after his father, practical to a fault and utterly blind when it comes to matters of the heart." "Mrs. Caldwell." "Martha, please. After all these weeks, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Martha," Delia amended. "I value my position here too much to risk complicating things." The older woman regarded her thoughtfully. "Let me tell you something about Rylan Nash. When he came to us, he was a half-starved boy with eyes like a wounded animal. Whatever his father did to him, and he's never spoken of it in detail, it left scars deeper than the visible ones on his back." Delia's breath caught. "His father beat him." Martha nodded grimly. "Severely, from what Edward could gather. It took years before Rylan stopped flinching when someone raised their voice or made a sudden movement. Years before he truly believed we wouldn't turn him out for a single mistake." She resumed chopping, her movements precise. "In 15 years, I've never seen him show particular interest in any woman, though plenty have tried to catch his eye. Until you, the way he watches you, speaks of you, it's different." "I don't know what to do," Delia admitted softly. "Do nothing," Martha advised. "Let things unfold naturally. Rylan will move at his own pace or not at all. And as for Thomas's concerns," she snorted, "the Diamond Bar is as much Rylan's home as it is ours. No one, not even you, could draw him away from it if he didn't want to go." The conversation left Delia with much to consider. That night, unable to sleep, she slipped downstairs for a glass of water. To her surprise, a lamp still burned in the front room. Rylan sat in an armchair by the fireplace, a book open on his knee. He looked up at her entrance, a smile warming his features. "Couldn't sleep?" "No," Delia admitted. "My mind is too busy tonight." "Mine too." He gestured to the chair opposite his. "Join me. Or would that be improper at this hour?" There was a teasing note in his voice that made Delia smile despite her misgivings. She settled into the indicated chair, tucking her dressing gown more securely around her. "What are you reading?" she asked. Rylan turned the book to show her the cover. "Wordsworth. Poetry isn't typically my preference, but Edward insisted I borrow this volume. He claims it will elevate my sensibilities." Delia laughed softly. "And has it? I'm not sure about my sensibilities, but it's certainly given me new ways to think about beauty." His eyes held hers meaningfully. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the occasional pop from the dying embers in the fireplace. "Thomas spoke to you today," Rylan said suddenly. Delia's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "He spoke to me as well." Rylan closed the book, setting it aside. "Asked me about my intentions regarding you, as if we were characters in some Victorian novel." "What did you tell him?" Delia asked, her heart suddenly racing. Rylan's expression grew serious. "I told him that my feelings for you are my own concern, and that I've never given him reason to doubt my commitment to the Diamond Bar." "Your feelings for me," Delia echoed softly. Rylan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Delia, I'm not a man who expresses himself easily. The words don't come naturally to me. But from the moment I saw you give your last dollar to that beggar in Nebraska City, I knew you were someone special." Delia's throat tightened with emotion. "Rylan, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "These past weeks, getting to know you, watching you become part of life here at the ranch, it's only confirmed what I suspected that first day. You're the most genuine, compassionate woman I've ever met." He stood, moving to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just want you to know that whatever happens, however long you choose to stay at the Diamond Bar, my feelings for you won't change." Delia looked into his earnest blue eyes and found her own reservations melting away. "I care for you too, Rylan, more than I thought possible in such a short time." The smile that spread across his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, almost tentative at first, but when Delia's hands moved to his shoulders, Rylan deepened it, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unevenly. "I've wanted to do that since the dance," Rylan admitted. "I've wanted you to," Delia confessed. He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We should probably get some sleep. Morning comes early on a ranch." Reluctantly, they said their goodnights, Rylan watching from the foot of the stairs as Delia ascended to her room. Inside, she touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss, and knew that whatever complications might lie ahead, her heart had already made its choice. The following weeks brought a deepening of their relationship. Rylan and Delia were discreet, mindful of propriety, but their growing affection was evident to those around them. Martha observed with quiet approval, while Edward seemed oblivious to the romance blossoming under his roof. Thomas maintained a watchful reserve, but as the ranch continued to run smoothly, his concerns seemed to ease. July arrived with blazing heat that turned the prairie to gold. Delia, accustomed now to the rhythm of ranch life, had settled into her role with confidence. Her sewing skills had expanded beyond mending, to include crafting new garments for the household, and even some decorative pieces that Martha displayed proudly. One Sunday afternoon, with the day's chores completed, Rylan asked Delia if she'd like to ride out with him to see a special spot on the property. "It's about an hour's ride," he explained. "I thought we could pack a small picnic." Delia agreed eagerly. Though she'd been at the Diamond Bar for months now, her duties had kept her close to the house, and she'd seen little of the ranch's more distant reaches. Hector provided them with a basket of cold chicken, fresh bread, and early summer berries. Rylan saddled a gentle mare for Delia, patient as she mounted somewhat awkwardly, her experience with horseback riding limited. They rode at a leisurely pace, Rylan pointing out features of the landscape and sharing stories of his early days on the ranch. Delia found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's movement, enjoying the vastness of the prairie stretching around them. After about an hour, they crested a hill to reveal a small valley below. A clear stream wound through it, lined with cottonwood trees that provided welcome shade. Wildflowers dotted the grass with splashes of color. "It's beautiful," Delia breathed as they dismounted by the stream. "I found this spot my first year at the Diamond Bar," Rylan told her, spreading a blanket in the shade of the largest cottonwood. "I used to come here when I needed to think or just be alone." "Have you brought others here before?" Delia asked, settling on the blanket. Rylan shook his head. "Never. This has always been my private sanctuary." The significance of him sharing it with her wasn't lost on Delia. As they enjoyed their simple meal, conversation flowed easily between them, touching on childhood memories, hopes for the future, and the small day-to-day happenings that had become the fabric of their shared experience at the ranch. After they'd eaten, Rylan stretched out on the blanket, his head pillowed on Delia's lap. She ran her fingers through his hair, still marveling at how natural such intimacy felt between them. "I've been thinking," Rylan said, his eyes closed in contentment. "About us, about the future." Delia's heart quickened. "Have you?" He sat up, turning to face her, his expression serious. "Delia, I know it hasn't been long, only a few months since we met. Some might say it's too soon to be certain, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He took her hands in his. "I love you. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Joy swept through Delia like a summer storm, powerful and transformative. "I love you too, Rylan. I think I have since that first night when you bought me dinner." His smile was radiant. "Then will you marry me? Become my wife?" "Yes," Delia answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will." Rylan pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotion words couldn't express. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling so broadly it almost hurt. "There's something else," Rylan said, his arms still around her. "Edward approached me last week. He and Martha are getting older, and they've been thinking about the future of the Diamond Bar." Delia listened as Rylan explained that Edward had offered him a partnership in the ranch, quarter share to start, with the opportunity to increase his ownership over time. Thomas will inherit the largest portion, of course, but Edward wants to ensure the ranch's future with experienced management. He views me as a son in many ways. Rylan's voice held wonder at this fact, even after 15 years. "With this partnership, we could build a home of our own on Diamond Bar land, a place for us, for our future children." The picture he painted, a home filled with love, children running across the prairie, a lifetime spent together under Nebraska skies, filled Delia's heart to bursting. "It sounds perfect," she told him, sealing the promise with another kiss. They returned to the ranch house as the sun began its descent, their happiness evident in their linked hands and matching smiles. Martha took one look at them and knew. "Well," she demanded, hands on hips but eyes twinkling. "Delia has agreed to become my wife," Rylan announced, his voice proud. Martha's face broke into a wide smile. "It's about time." She embraced Delia warmly. "Welcome to the family, my dear, though you've been part of it in spirit for some time now." Edward, summoned from his study, offered gruff congratulations that couldn't quite hide his pleasure. Even Thomas managed a genuine smile and handshake for Rylan. "You've chosen well," he told his foreman with a respectful nod to Delia. "We're fortunate to keep you both at the Diamond Bar." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of fire, Delia's mind returned to that day in Nebraska City when she'd given her last dollar to a blind beggar. "I never found out his name," she mused. "The old man who received my dollar. I've often wondered what became of him." Rylan squeezed her hand. "Whoever he was, he changed both our lives that day. Your kindness to him led me to you." "From $1 silver to a lifetime of happiness," Delia said softly. "It seems an uneven exchange in my favor." Rylan kissed her temple. "Not from where I'm standing. That dollar was the best investment either of us ever made." They were married in September, when the heat of summer had given way to the gentle warmth of early autumn. The ceremony took place at the Diamond Bar, with neighbors from surrounding ranches and townsfolk from Nebraska City in attendance. Martha insisted on making Delia's wedding dress herself, a gesture of love that brought tears to the younger woman's eyes. The result was a creation of ivory silk, with delicate embroidery that showcased both Martha's design and Delia's skillful execution, as they'd worked on it together in the evenings leading up to the wedding. Rylan, standing before the minister in a new suit, looked at Delia with such love and pride that several of the women present dabbed at their eyes. When they exchanged their vows, his voice was steady and sure, while Delia's trembled slightly with emotion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "Mr. Nash, you may kiss your bride." Rylan gathered Delia into his arms, his kiss communicating all the joy and promise of their future together. The assembled guests broke into applause. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed an army, thanks to Hector's enthusiastic preparations. As darkness fell, lanterns illuminated the yard, creating a magical setting for the newlyweds' first dance. "Happy Mrs. Nash," Rylan murmured as he guided her around the makeshift dance floor. "Completely," Delia assured him, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain all she felt. Later that night, in the small cabin, Edward and Martha had given them as a wedding gift a temporary home, until their own house could be built. Rylan and Delia discovered the deep, intimate connection that would bind them even closer together. Their love, already strong, deepened with this physical expression of their commitment to one another. As they lay together afterward, Delia's head resting on Rylan's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Rylan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I'm thinking how fortunate I am," Delia replied. "A few months ago, I was alone in the world with nothing but $1 to my name. Now I have a husband I adore, a home, work I enjoy, and a family who has welcomed me as their own." Rylan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "The good fortune is mutual, my love. You've given me a happiness I never thought possible." In the years that followed, the Diamond Bar prospered under the combined management of Thomas and Rylan. True to Edward's promise, Rylan's partnership share grew, providing a secure future for him and Delia. Their own house, built on a rise overlooking the stream where Rylan had proposed, became a warm and welcoming home. Delia's talents as a seamstress expanded into a small business, creating fine garments and quilts that were sought after throughout the county. In the spring of 1881, their first child was born, a son they named James Edward Nash, in honor of both Rylan's grandfather and the man who had been more of a father to him than his own had ever been. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Martha, whose arrival coincided with the planting of an apple orchard that would, in time, become another source of pride for the Diamond Bar. Through all the changes, the growth of their family, the expansion of the ranch, the gradual transformation of Nebraska from frontier territory to settled state, Rylan and Delia's love remained constant. They faced challenges together: drought years that tested the ranch's resources, illnesses that brought fear and sleepless nights, the inevitable losses that come with the passage of time. Edward passed peacefully in the winter of 1887, with Martha following him the next spring. Their deaths brought sorrow, but also a renewed commitment from those they left behind to honor their legacy by continuing to build on the foundation they had established. Thomas and Rylan's partnership deepened into a brotherhood, their different strengths complementing each other in ways that benefited the ranch and everyone who called it home. When Thomas finally married at age 40, his wife integrated seamlessly into the extended family that had formed around the Diamond Bar. As their children grew, Rylan and Delia made sure they understood the values that had brought their parents together: kindness, generosity, and the recognition that true wealth lay not in silver dollars, but in the connections forged with others. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Rylan surprised Delia with a journey back to Nebraska City, where their story had begun. Much had changed. The town had grown. New buildings had replaced some of the familiar landmarks of their first meeting, but the essential character of the place remained. They stayed at the hotel where Delia had once sought employment, now expanded and modernized. After settling in, Rylan suggested a walk down the main street. "I have someone I'd like you to meet," he told her mysteriously. Curious, Delia accompanied him to a small house on the outskirts of town. A neat garden surrounded it, and a rocking chair sat on the porch. In that chair was an elderly man, his sightless eyes turned toward the sun. "Mr. Johnson," Rylan called as they approached, "I've brought someone to see you." The old man's weathered face creased in a smile. "Mr. Nash." Right on time, as always. Delia looked between the two men in confusion. "You know each other?" "We do now," Rylan explained. "I've been corresponding with Mr. Johnson for several months, arranging this meeting." He turned to the elderly man. "Mr. Johnson, this is my wife, Delia." The blind man's face lit up. "The lady with the silver dollar. Is it really you?" Realization dawned on Delia. "You're the beggar from that day in town." Johnson nodded. "Though not a beggar anymore, thanks to you both." He gestured to the house behind him. "That dollar you gave me, miss, it was the beginning of a change in my fortunes. I used it for a decent meal, which gave me the strength to seek work at the livery stable. The owner took pity on me, gave me simple tasks I could manage despite my blindness." He went on to explain how he had saved his earnings, eventually investing in a small business venture with the stable owner's son. Their partnership had prospered enough to provide this modest home and comfortable retirement. "But I never forgot that act of kindness," Johnson said, reaching out his hand. Delia took it, blinking back tears. "When your husband found me and told me how that moment brought you two together, well, it seemed like Providence at work." "It was," Delia agreed, squeezing the old man's hand before releasing it to slip her arm through Rylan's. "That silver dollar bought me far more than I could have imagined." They spent the afternoon with Johnson, sharing stories and a meal he insisted on providing to return the favor. 20 years late," he said with a chuckle. As they walked back to their hotel in the golden light of late afternoon, Rylan pulled Delia close. "Happy anniversary, my love. 20 years, and I fall more in love with you each day." Delia rested her head on his shoulder. Who would have thought that a moment of kindness in a dusty street would lead to all this? A life fuller and richer than any I could have dreamed. "I knew," Rylan said simply. "From the moment I saw you give that dollar away, I knew you were someone special, someone who would change my life." "And you changed mine," Delia replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "With a dinner, a job offer, and a heart big enough to love me without reservation." As the sun set behind them, painting Nebraska City in the same golden hues that had illuminated their first meeting, Rylan and Delia walked hand in hand toward their future, secure in the knowledge that what had begun with a single act of generosity had blossomed into a lifetime of love, family, and happiness that would endure long after they were gone. For in the legacy they created, the ranch they helped build, the children they raised, the kindness they showed to all who crossed their path, the ripples of that one silver dollar continued to spread outward, touching lives in ways they would never fully know, but that made the world a better place for their having been in it. And in the end, that was worth more than all the gold in the West.